Hey! How's everyone doing? All right, tonight we're all signing up for Christian Mingle. We got some inspectors in the back. I'm just kidding. I just needed something really funny, and that is like one of my favorite videos about Christian Mingle. It's a very specific, there are like multiple videos about Christian Mingle that I do find funny, but that's definitely the top one. So, well, welcome to Fuse. I'm glad that everybody was able to come out tonight. My name is PJ, in case you don't know me. I'm the pastoral associate with Westover Fuse. So that means that I sometimes do this. So here I am. Just starting off real quick. Obviously, we're talking about dating tonight. Hey, Ethan. He was not going to stop until I waved back at him. But so tonight, you see family, friends, dating. We're not going in that order. We're skipping to dating. We'll talk about friends next week. Dating's much more important, right? So I was picked to do the dating. I don't know why. I guess maybe I think Michael's, you've dated 2 people? So he's dated 2 people. I dated 3 people, so I guess that I won. And now I have to talk about dating. So still definitely not prepared or qualified to talk about this. But the last time I dated, started officially dating someone was in high school. So that's a long time ago. But we're going to talk about dating tonight through the lens of Joseph. I do want to make one comment from last week. If you were here last week, you know that Michael talked about the Jenga blocks, and he said that he didn't believe that I could pull one out, like a whole row out. I definitely did it once. I had one witness, it was Renee. I know that you might think that that's not a true reference, but it was. It really happened. She definitely would have laughed at me if it failed miserably, and she didn't. So I can do that, and maybe I'll do it later for you. But I was gonna film a video of it, but then I just didn't have time to today. So I'm sorry. All of that to say, welcome to Fuse. All right, so we're going to talk about Joseph again. We're kind of going to continue his story. So if you were here last week, you know that we talked about Joseph and kind of his betrayal that happened within his family. And you know that Joseph was a part of this family, kind of a crazy, mixed up family with he had a billion stepmoms. He had 1 million brothers and sisters. It was just craziness. We know that there was a lot of betrayal. He was kind of looked at as the favorite son because he was the son from the favorite mother who had died, and so his father looked on him, but everybody else was kind of I don't know about this guy, and they took him and they threw him in a well, and then they were gonna kill him, and then they were like, you know what? Let's not kill him. Let's sell him because then we can get some money in our pockets. Kind of craziness stuff happening with family. And so he comes from a long line of betrayal within his family. And so he gets sold into slavery. And originally, he finally ends up being a slave in Potiphar's house. Now, Potiphar, if you were to think nowadays, he's the head of the Secret Service. He's the head of the Pharaoh's security detail. And so he's I don't know if you if I was working for the head of the Secret Service, I would make sure to do everything perfectly and never do anything wrong because he's a really scary guy. I actually don't know who the head of the Secret Service is. I guess it's the Treasury Secretary, so it's Janet Blue. I'm not that scared of her, but the head of the actual Secret Service, I'm probably pretty scared of him because he has a lot of guns and can kill me. But anyway, all of that's who Joseph is now the slave to. And if we look in Genesis, this is Genesis 39. And this is kind of, he's now been sold, he's been taken out of the well, he's been sold into slavery, and he's now working with Potiphar. And so it says, now Joseph had been brought to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian who had been brought to the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. I just want to talk about that for just a minute. Because if I was in Joseph's situation, and I had like encountered all this betrayal in my family, and then I was sold off, and I wasn't like just sold off to an Egyptian family that like had just a little house that I, had to take care of. Like I could probably do that. Like I can clean a floor and like make some food. But I'm put in charge of like this pretty important guy's house. And like this guy is really scary. I probably wouldn't be thinking like, oh good, the Lord's with me. That's fine. The Lord's with me here at this scary guy's house where I am now living, and this is my only home, and I have to do everything he says because I'm a slave, and if I don't, he's gonna kill me. Like that's really scary, and probably if I was in his situation, I would not like be like, yes, I'm going to continue to follow the Lord. But you see here that it says the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was in the house, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. Verse 3 says, his master saw the Lord was with him, and the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in the sight and attended to him, and he made him the overseer of the house and put him in charge of all that he had. Okay, the tide's kind of turning for Joseph now, right? So he's put in charge of the house of Potiphar, and because Potiphar sees like all of the things that God is doing in his life, and God's really showing up for like a major way, which is good because he kind of just let Joseph be in a well for a while and like be sold into slavery, and kind of the whole like reason, like Joseph's probably thinking in his head, he's like, well yeah, God better bless me in this because he got me into this whole mess. I know that's what I would think if I were in that situation. Let's continue to read the story. It says in verse 5, from the time that he made his overseer in the house and all over that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So Potiphar is like, man, I did good. I bought this slave, and he's now come, and the Lord has favor on him. So because the Lord's looking out for him, he's looking out for me, and I'm super rich and like don't have to worry about anything. I can go and be like in the charge of the guard, which probably just meant that he like went and partied with the Pharaoh all the time. Like that's all he had to worry about, because Joseph was in charge of his entire house, as in everything that he had. Joseph was in charge of. And so at this point in time, like, yeah, like Joseph is in slavery, that's bad. But like pretty much everything else in Joseph's life is looking pretty up. Especially from the part where he was like in a well and his brothers, instead of killing him, sold him into slavery. Like things are moving up for him. And so you start to see that like, that betrayal starts to kind of go away. And I know last week we kind of talked, and Michael talked about how like, the betrayal, the pieces come out of the Jenga block, and like it creates, see if I can find the loose ones. It creates like holes in your foundation, and basically what's happening is like, Joseph is like, oh, like, yeah, these pieces got taken out by my brothers and by my dad, and like, I have a lot of pieces missing. But like, God's doing some pretty good stuff. God's like, he's like, hey, I'm not going to make you just like a slave of any old house. I'm going to make you a slave of one of the most powerful people in the kingdom. And so here's like a little bit of rebuilding. Like we can kind of just, stick this in and be like, okay, Joseph kind of got a little bit of rebuild. Like some of that betrayal is kind of being filled in. But then we see that God has a different plan. And even though like Joseph is going with the ways of the Lord, like the Lord is with him, it says that over and over, that the Lord is with Joseph. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be like super great. And let's continue. And this is kind of where we get into the meat of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So this is Genesis 39, we're going to start at verse 6. Now this is a pretty good verse if you're Joseph. Like, Joseph has to be pretty proud that this is in the Bible. It says, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. I don't know if you got like, I want that written about me in the Bible. Like that's pretty nice. So now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife, this Potiphar's wife, cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." Yeah, exactly. So, like, the whole story is being, like, built up that Potiphar's trusting Joseph with his entire house. Like, Potiphar's basically like, "Joseph, you are doing a great job because the Lord is blessing you. You are in charge of everything in the house. I'm going to go over here and party with Pharaoh, and you're going to hang out here, and I'm going away." And then Potiphar goes away and, like, is hanging out, but his wife's still at home, and his wife is basically like, "Well, you know what? You are very attractive. It says so right here in the Bible." And I don't think she actually said that. But she's like, "Oh, you are really attractive. Come and lie with me." And if you, like, remember anything about Joseph's past, like, Joseph's dad had how many wives? Like 1 billion wives. And, was just like, one wife would be like, "Oh, I want a kid, so here's a servant, make her pregnant." And it's just like he did that, like, over and over. Like, there are no, like, his father didn't instill these morals of, like, "Hey, you need to, be with one woman and that is your wife, and, like, that is important." Like, his father didn't kind of, like, say that to him, didn't act it out, certainly, even if he did say it to him. Like, Joseph has to be thinking, like, okay, like, this woman was not, like, it's not like he was like, "Oh, like, you want me to lie with you, but, like, I don't know, like, you're kind of ugly." Like, this woman was like a supermodel of the day. Like, think about, like, if like, okay, again, it's throwing me off that the head of the Secret Service is not, like, okay, never mind. Okay, we're moving on. So like, this is like a supermodel of the day. Like, if like a supermodel came up to any guy in this room and was like, "Hey, I want to lie with you." Like, first of all, you'd be like, "What? What century are you living in? And why did you just say that to me?" But probably then you would be like, "Oh, that's a supermodel." And you'd probably be like, "Okay, yeah." Don't do that. If a supermodel comes in, I would be watching the door. If a supermodel comes in, Let's see what Joseph did, because Joseph is a really good example of what to do. So she said, "Lie with me." Verse 8, "But he refused and said to his master's wife, 'Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?' And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her." So basically, Joseph's response, it's in like 4 different sections. Joseph's response to her is basically no across the board, but he does it in 4 different ways. And this is like, if you ever, like, look up, like, how to battle temptation on the internet, or, like, you're like, "What does the Bible say about temptation?" This story will pop up, because this is like the textbook of temptation. Like, this woman, this supermodel is coming after Joseph and is like, "I would like to lie with you." And he, like, has, like, this great response to her. And basically it's this. Like, there are 4 different ways, and I'm going to break it down into the different verses. The first verse is verse 8. And this is the first time that he refuses. He met with a firm refusal. He wasn't like, "No, I'm okay. I'm fine." Like, he didn't do that. He met with a firm refusal. Verse 8 says, "But he refused and said to his master's wife, 'Behold, because my master has no concern about anything in the house, he has put everything that he has in my charge.'" Like, he was ready to go. I don't think that, like, he knew that, like, this woman that he worked for was going to come after him and try to sleep with him, but he had an answer ready to go, at the ready. He met with a firm refusal. In verse 9, we see that he met it with a faith-based refusal. Verse 9, he said, "He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept anything back from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Notice that it's not a sin against the master. That was in the first refusal. This is another refusal that he gives, and this is because of his faith in God. The next verse, in verse 10, it says, as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. The third thing that he does is he met it with a faithful refusal. Like, it wasn't just like, okay, the one time, nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be firm in my resolution to not let into this temptation, and I'm gonna be faithful to my God to not give into this temptation. Day after day, think about it. He's working in the house. Like, the only people around are him, the other servants, and her. Remember that Potiphar is out partying with Pharaoh. Like, he's not there. This is like the most interaction he has with a person is with this woman who is trying to sleep with him. And he faithfully refuses each and every time. And verse 12, it says, but one day he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house. So it's just him and Potiphar's wife. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. So she grabbed his jacket and was like, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. If you are struggling with temptation, just go back to, he does such a great job. He runs away and he meets her with a final refusal. Think about how easy it would have been to be like, okay, there's no one around, nobody's really going to know about this, so yeah, why not? Like, he easily could have done that, nobody would have known. But he was like, no, I'm firm in my resolve. And he ran away without his jacket on. I don't know if it was cold. It's Egypt, so probably not. But he ran. And we could end the story here and be like, okay, temptation is bad, but it can be overcome. Look at Joseph. These are the 4 ways that you can overcome temptation. And I could end it there, and we could have a great week. I could be like, don't give in to temptation. But I'm not going to end it there, because I want to keep going, because as we look at betrayal, I think it's important to look at the next part of the story. Because Joseph is faithful to God. He is allowing God to continue to place these pieces in, and God is continuing to use him in incredible ways. And God is continuing to put pieces back and be like, okay, yeah, you did good. You overcame temptation, so this piece gets to go back. Good job. That betrayal is no longer, you're doing a good job. And that's great, but let's read what happens next. We pick up in verse 12, actually verse 13. So she caught his garment. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hands and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of the household and said to them, see, he, that's Potiphar, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. In one version of the Bible, in this one, what is this, New International Version, it says he has brought a Hebrew to come and make sport of us. She is going into the field. Everybody else in this house is Egyptian, and he's the only one that is a Hebrew. And so the fear of outsiders, she's like, look, he has come to make sport of us. And she said, as soon as he heard, I lost my place. Oh, here we go. So to laugh at us, he came in to lie with me and cried out in a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. So instead of Joseph being okay, I've had it pretty rough. I've been betrayed by my family. My brother sold me. This is a good break. God has left me in control of all of this house. This supermodel wants to sleep with me. And yeah, this is a good, nobody's going to know. We're totally alone. Nobody's going to know about this. He could have easily done that. The betrayal part of him, if he's acting out of betrayal, that is 100% what he's going to do. But he doesn't act out of betrayal, and he's betrayed again. He didn't do any of the things that she said, but she is holding his garment. Remember, because he ran away from her, and she grabbed it, and he just went out of it and ran away. But she's holding on to it, and she makes up the story and betrays him. And as we see, I'm not going to read it verbatim, I'm just going to give you a little summary of what happened. Potiphar comes back, and she's like, look, the Hebrew that you brought here tried to sleep with me. He's trying to make sport of me. And Potiphar gets really angry because obviously, like, he's an angry guy because he's the head of the guard for the Pharaoh, and he locks up and sends to prison Joseph. So, like, Joseph, the textbook of temptation and getting away from temptation, oftentimes we leave it there. We're like, look at how good he did with temptation. But then right after that, he's betrayed. He didn't do anything wrong. Like, she was coming on to him, and he ran. Like, he did everything right by the book. He wrote the book. Like, it was perfect. But she betrays him, and because of that betrayal, he gets sent to jail. And I'm not going to spoil too much of the story for next week. But basically, he gets sent to jail, and God is still with him. And it says, if we go a little bit further, in verse 21, it said, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Like, Joseph continues to get betrayed, but God is always there one step at a time. Like, it is just like every step of the way, God is there. No matter who betrays Joseph, God knows that we're going to be betrayed. God knew that Joseph was going to be betrayed by Potiphar's wife. And he prepared a place for him when he was betrayed. And it said, and the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. Like, same thing that happened to after he was betrayed by his family. God comes back and continues to fill in the stuff. He's like, okay, like, I know you're betrayed, but here we go. Like, you are in charge of the prison and all the prisoners. I don't know what kind of prison guard is like, hey, this prisoner looks pretty trustworthy, so we're going to put him in charge of all the other prisoners. Not a good prison logic. But God makes it happen. God is like, no, that is what is happening. You are being put in charge of all the prisoners. And it says, because the Lord was with him. And God was with him every step of the way. So that's kind of the story of Joseph and how he's betrayed in this relationship. And so I was given the task of tying this into dating. And it's like, I don't know any dating relationships. I wasn't in a dating relationship where a supermodel tried to sleep with me and I ran away and then she put me in prison. That didn't happen to me. That's not my dating past. But I kind of, as I was looking at this, something kind of came on and it was like, okay, like, I kind of understand where I want to go with this. And so I'm going to take it into application now and kind of how this all ties into dating. Because a lot of times we see betrayal. We're betrayed. Like, it happens. It happens to us all the time. We're betrayed by our family. We're betrayed in relationships. Maybe it's not like that, you were put in jail because of, like, you ran away from temptation, but we've all been burned in dating relationships. And if you haven't been burned, you're probably gonna be burned. Like, you will be betrayed at some point. Even if you use Christian Mingle, like, it's going to happen. But oftentimes when we talk about dating, we talk about how far is too far, right? Like, I think every dating talk when I was in high school, that was one, we always had like a Q&A, and one question always, it was like some person is like, yeah, how far is too far? And I always kind of laughed at that question, and I was like, okay, like, you're obviously asking this question because you want to go make out with somebody. So, like, I don't think anything that I'm going to say is going to tell you, like, don't go and make out with somebody. But if you're asking the question, how far is too far? Like, what's a good answer? And that's kind of where I want to take this a little bit. Basically, like, if we were to ask Joseph and be like, Joseph, how far is too far? Like, if we were in his position, if we had his shoes on, His sandals, I'm guessing they're wearing sandals, not Chacos, just regular sandals. No Vibram, soles. It's okay, but I like the Chacos. But like, if we are standing in Joseph's shoes, probably if we are asked, like, how far is too far? You're like, oh yeah, like how far? Like, oh yeah, I totally slept with that supermodel. Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's probably what if we're going into the betrayal that Joseph was experiencing, that is how we're going to react. Like, that's just human nature of like, yes, of course. Like, as we start to miss blocks out of here, like we're starting to be betrayed, and blocks are coming out, and we're like, okay, yeah, blocks are coming out, but like our foundation starts to crumble, and all of a sudden, like, we're just doing things that we never thought we would be doing because we're acting out of our hurt. We're acting out of the empty spaces in our foundation. When we start to have these blocks and like things start to move out and there's spaces there, we start to doubt our identity. And maybe you're sitting there like, yeah, that is, like, I do. Like, I feel like a lot of the things that have happened, I have given in to temptation. I've done things that I wish that I wouldn't have done. And a lot of it is because I couldn't, like, in the moment of things, I just looked at my betrayal and I was like, I just want, like, I want something to help me to, like, cover this up. Like, I don't want to think about the hurt that I have anymore. And I think when that happens, we're just acting so much out of the hurt that it's hard to see what God is trying to do. And what God is trying to do is perfectly illustrated in Romans 6. If you have your Bibles or your phones, flip to Romans 6. I'm going to read the first 4 verses, but I want you to be able to see them. So if you've got it in front of you, pull it out. If not, just visualize the words as I say them. It says, "What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We are those who have died to sin. How could we live it any longer? Or don't you know that all of us who were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death?" This is the part that I really want you to hear. Verse 4, it says, "We are therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that, just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may have new life." What God is basically saying here in Romans is if we all have hurt. And we all have these empty spaces in our lives that we're just looking for someone to fill. Maybe it's somebody that we're trying to date. Maybe it's somebody that is in our family and we're just like, oh, if only my dad showed up. If only my mom was there for me. Like, we're always looking to fill up the emptiness that's in our life, that's in our identity. But what God's saying here is not that he just wants to take blocks and be like, okay, here's some good stuff for you. Like, you get to be in charge of Potiphar's house. That's good. You get a pretty nice life and place this back in. God doesn't want to do that. God's not like, okay, like you've had some betrayal, but there's this really cute girl or there's this really cute guy and you get to date him for a while. So here you go. When we start to let God transform our life, and when we really live out what it means to be Christ followers and to be baptized into Christ, and that's what happens when we get baptized. We have this symbolism of baptism that you go into the grave and then you come out of the water and you are risen again with Christ. That's what baptism is all about. That's why you go in the water and come out of the water. It's not just like you're taking a bath and you're washed clean. It's that you are literally dying to yourself. And when that happens, it's not just like we still have a lot of our blocks and, all the hurt and stuff, and we get to, make little spaces for God. And we still are continuing to make things around the life that we had. If you look there in verse 4, it says that we may have a new life. And when a new life happens, that means that this entire thing of blocks does not matter anymore. This block that we're using to fill into our space doesn't matter. These blocks don't matter. What matters is that we have new life. And we have new life through Christ. And we have new life from this book. And when God knocks down our identity, when God knocks down our lives, when he continues to push the blocks, that's what he was doing with Joseph's life. He continued to push blocks down. He's like, no, I don't just want you to be Joseph with a little bit of God. I want you to be Christ. I want you to be baptized with Christ so that no longer am I just filling spots for you. But I'm taking my word, I'm taking all that I am, I'm taking my identity and I'm placing it here, and you get to build on that. I don't know if you guys see that and you're like, yes. Or if you see that and you're like, oh my gosh, that fall is gonna hurt. Yeah, all of the above. But when we finally give over our lives, when we give up our identities, when we just give it over to God, I can tell you that the foundation that you're building on this book, the foundation that you're building on God, is way better than just trying to patch the holes that betrayal and hurt have given you. Let's pray. Dear Lord, just thank you so much for this time that we can just come together and be able to look at your word, to be able to just see what it is that you want for our lives, Lord. Lord, I know that many of us in this room have been betrayed. That many of us are looking for ways to fill that betrayal. Lord, I just pray that anybody in this room that is dealing with just trying to put the pieces back together, Lord, they would seek out an adult, they would seek out a friend, Lord, that they would seek out you, so that they no longer have to just fill the holes of betrayal, but that they can build anew with the one foundation that will never crumble, that will never have pieces taken out of it. And Lord, I pray that if we are living on the other side of this, if we have that foundation, that Lord, we don't just sit on that foundation, that we aren't just sitting there and like, yeah, life is good. We don't have the need to continue to try to fill the holes. Lord, you have conquered death. You have made us new. But Lord, I pray that we continue to build on that foundation that you have given us. Lord, that we continue to try to find more and more of you in our lives. Lord, thank you for this place. Thank you that it's a place that we can come together and be able to show our hurt so that we can find healing. And Lord, I pray that anybody in here that is hurting can find healing in you. I pray this all in Jesus' name.